All right. Well, welcome everybody. We are starting our new book, and it is The Energy Buzz by John Gordon. I'm super excited about this. This was the very first John Gordon book I ever read, and it was given to me by a regional that we used to have, and I just loved her, and I love the book. And for me, I know some people are not. They don't like to read all that much, or their mind wanders. My mind wanders too sometimes when I'm reading, honestly. I have to be in the mood. I have to be in the right frame of mind to be able to read a book. But to me, a book is like one of the best gifts for me. Just because I really appreciate people's, especially if it's a book they've read and they're recommending and they just love. So it's such a huge gift for me. So I always love that she gave me a book. I had a host one time that gave me a book. It was just so sweet. It was a John Maxwell book. I was like, oh my gosh. So anyway, so while I was kind of like reading through it last night, and it was funny because I did not have any highlights in this book, and I am a highlighter, okay? Highlight everything, and I have notes in the margin and all this other stuff, especially with my business books. And I couldn't believe it. And I told my husband, I was like, maybe I have 2 copies of this, and there's another one somewhere that's highlighted, which I might have 2 copies. But yeah, so it's like it's brand new again. But as I was kind of going through, I actually read the foreword that was written by Ken Blanchard, who is the writer of The 1 Minute Manager, which I've referenced a decent amount over the years. He has a very simple way of writing with his business and things like that, that just make it very simple and to implement his ideas from his books. But he wrote the foreword in here, and there was a couple things that I just highlighted just from that. And I'm not going to read it. I just kind of want to touch on it. So one of the things he said was, to run a successful organization, you must learn to manage people's energy, including your own. And I think we all know that the pace of the leaders, pace of the pack, all that kind of good stuff. But it's the same thing with our energy, right? And what I notice, and we'll probably talk about this some more, what I notice is that if I'm having a day where I feel like everybody's in a bad mood, right? Say you're running errands. It doesn't happen that much anymore because you don't really go out and run like a whole bunch of errands. We're hardly running any errands at all in our house. But when I would be running errands and everybody I'd run into is in a bad mood, right? You have those days where you're just like, what is wrong with these people? They're always in a bad mood. It immediately, you have to kind of look at yourself. Like if time, you're the common denominator, right? And so when I realize everybody coming at me is in a bad mood, I'm like, okay, so what am I putting out there that is attracting people to like, or influencing people to talk to me in this way or whatever. And so I'm like, okay, so I always look at myself first. And that's something that I probably picked up from this book all those years ago, is just kind of like self-reflecting. If everybody's kind of in a bad mood, I need to look at myself and see what my mood is. So turning that to our teams, right? If your team's kind of in a weird place and they're not really engaged and they're not doing things like that with you, look at yourself first. How engaged are you? Are they seeing you be engaged? Are you engaging, posting on your team page? Are you, and so it's really important, if you're the people around you or the people you're trying to influence, if they're coming at you with some bad energy, a bad, grumpy, or they're just not engaging, look at yourself first, and I think that that's always the best place to start. And of course, when it comes to team engagement, you can start engaging, and it's going to take a little bit before they start engaging back. So you have to kind of keep going forward with that. And it's the same thing with a positive attitude. If you've kind of been in this negative space for a while and all of a sudden you're like, good morning, everybody, they're not going to turn around on a dime quite like you're hoping they will. Right, Jenny? Look at her face.
They're going to be like, oh, this will last 5 minutes. That's great.
They're like, did you get some St. John's wort in the mail? Like, what's going on over there?
Yes. The picture we've been talking about? Awesome.
That's right. Awesome. Yeah. So it doesn't happen overnight. And so it is important. Like, I remember in my own household when I was trying to be the positive force in my household all those years ago. Now I'm not the only crusader in the house, right? But all those years ago when the kids were toddlers and Eric was stressed out, this job that he just absolutely hated was not having success. We were struggling financially, all of that. I knew I needed to be the light in the house. I knew that I had to bring that to the house if we had any chance of not like absolutely being at each other's throats, honestly. And so it was, and sometimes it was an uphill battle. And yes, there were times I had meltdowns and I'm like, I'm so tired of being the cheerleader of this family, right? But it's important to just kind of look at that. And so then also, what are you saying, Jenny?
I remember one time when we were talking about this kind of stuff, and I was talking to Sam, and I called her and I said, I have called 15 people. I can't get a party. I can't get an order. Nobody even wants to talk. And she was like, don't get back on the phone.
Whatever
goes,
you do,
do
stop.
not call one more person today. She goes, you are alienating people right now. She goes, so how many more people are on your list to call? I said like 20. She goes, tomorrow. She goes, do not call one more person today.
It's so funny. It's so true, though. It's so true. Yeah,
they're definitely. You're already there. She goes, I guarantee if you call those other 20, you're not going to get any orders.
That is so funny. So true.
Yeah, it was very
so
true. It went much better the next day. I just had to walk away.
Yeah. So then he talks about, so in this, he gave an example that he was at a conference. Okay, the hair. What is going on? Okay. Driving me crazy. Okay, so he was at a conference, and so he had everybody greet each other like they didn't care. Like they didn't care who you were, and they were just kind of like, hey, whatever to everybody. So they're greeting each other like that. So then he said, everybody, and everybody's kind of like, there's just this low murmur in the room. Then he said, greet the people around you as if they're your long lost friends. And he said, everybody's like, oh my gosh, how are you? And they're giving each other hugs and doing all this. And he was like, he said, did you feel that? Did you feel the energy shift in the room? And he said, all I did was change your focus from a negative thought to a positive thought. And the energy in the room was increased tenfold. Yes. Did Pam, I think she did. Yeah, you're right, Jean. I'm sure Pam has done this before with us at a meeting, just kind of like helping you, because I know we've done trainings with the rules of the bus at Champion a couple times over the years. So I'm sure we did that, but it's really powerful. And you think about, what I always thought was interesting was when I would walk into people's homes for home parties, right? You get a vibe. When you walk into people's houses. I remember specifically, there was one house, the moment I walked in, I felt very uncomfortable and I wanted to leave. And that was the energy in the house. There's something going on in the house, not necessarily the people that were coming to the parties, but something going on in that house. And my whole way home, I found myself praying for that person because of that energy that was in the house, right? And I always wanted my house to have this like positive energy of like welcoming, come on in, blah, blah, blah. And it's funny because I can even sense it, right? When I'm in a mood, which happens when I'm in a mood, you can sense it. You can sense it kind of like in the house, especially if people outside of the house are there in that moment. Or like, for example, I go to my mom's house because we're, family's in town or whatever, but I'm not in the mood for it. I feel like I'm walking through that house like, like, and so it's important to kind of recognize that. But then we've also stepped into host house where it's so welcoming. You just like didn't even want to leave. You felt like you're one of the family. And it's not necessarily them saying, come in, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's not about the words. It's about the energy in the space. So it is important to kind of recognize that. So the energy bus, he says, every morning you have a choice. Are you going to be a positive thinker or a negative thinker? Positive thinking will energize you. When you get to work, you have another choice. You can catch people doing things right, or you can catch people doing things wrong. And again, that kind of goes back to, that self-reflection. If your team's kind of being weird on you right now, or you've gone through a period in the past where your team's been kind of wonky and you're just like, what's going on? Sometimes that is, that's the Yes, Lydia.
Yeah.
Where are you reading?
Oh, I was looking, that was just a couple notes from the forward. We're getting ready to go to chapter 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just a couple
Thank
notes
you.
from the forward. Yeah. And so when that's happening, we have a tendency to see what everybody's doing wrong, right? And that's when we call each other, when we talk to each other, it's like, oh my gosh, my managers are not doing anything. They're not even doing parties. And right? We've all done it. We've all done it. Jenny's like, I haven't.
I got nothing.
Baloney. Right? So we're catching them doing everything. All we're seeing is everything they're doing wrong. Right? And so it's important in that moment to kind of realize, like, okay, we need to find something they're doing right. Even if they just spelled everything correctly in the rant that they just put on your team page that you had to take down. Right? Just something, anything. And so, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
you're
important.
active on the team page. I'm so excited.
Right. So excited that you're posting on the team page. Let's turn this around. Yeah. And so it is, it's important to kind of like, and it's the small things. And thinking about like in our life, when we were going through that time that it was hard to be positive. There were times that in the morning, I was just like, thank you, Lord, for waking me up today. Thank you for, and you have to take it out. Thank you for the air that I breathe. Thank you for, and it was funny. I was talking to somebody the other day and they were all upset about the masks, it wasn't the controversial, are you wearing a mask, not wearing a mask? They were just upset at the state of affairs that we are needing to wear masks. Right. And I found myself, I was just like, you know what? That's okay, because we're wearing masks for one reason. We're not wearing masks because our air is polluted and we can't possibly breathe the air outside our windows. That's intense, right? And so it just kind of gives it a little perspective. It's one of those like Pam Cliff sayings, it could always be worser, right? It could always be worser. So we always need to find something to be grateful for.
The word, did you know what I meant? Then yes, it's a word.
Yes. All right. So, we're going to start on chapter 1. I'm going to try reading, but if I'm kind of funky, Jenny, I want you to take over. Some days I can read very well, and other days I just like fumble over all my words.
Me to read the book.
Hey, that's a thought. Why don't you start? I'm starting to feel a little something in my throat.
Give it a drink.
All right.
You want me to read? I can read.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, you can read. She's just a better reader than I am.
I'll read and you just stop me whenever you want to say something amazing. It was Monday and Mondays were never good for George. He stood in his driveway looking at his car and shaking his head. He wasn't surprised, really. Misfortune had been following him for the past few years like a dark rain cloud hovering over his life, and today was no different. His tire was completely flat and George's face was about to burst. "Not today," he shouted as he opened the trunk, only to find a flat spare tire. He heard his wife's words in his head. "You should get that fixed, George. One day you're going to have a flat and wish you had a spare tire." Why does she always have to be right, he wondered. George thought of his neighbor Dave and ran down the block to see if he had already left for work. Dave worked downtown too, and George was hoping to catch a quick ride with him. George had an important meeting with his team at work, and today he couldn't afford to be late. Not today, especially not today. George punched the air with his clenched fist when he saw that Dave's car was gone. Of course, he thought, why would he still be here? That would be too easy. As sweat poured from his brow, he ran back home, then stood in his driveway and looked at his cell phone, trying to think of someone at work he could call. Think. Then it dawned on him. He couldn't think of one person at work he could call who would come pick him up. His only option left was his wife, and she was the last person he wanted to ask. George walked in the house and heard the usual noise and chaos coming from the kitchen. He could hear the puppy jumping around and his wife trying to get the kids to sit still and eat their breakfast before heading off to school. He peered through the kitchen archway. As soon as the children saw him, the cheers erupted. "Hi, Daddy," they yelled. His daughter came up to him and wrapped her arms around his hip. "I love you, Daddy," she said as George barely acknowledged her. His son shouted, "Dad, can we play basketball right now?" George was like a reluctant celebrity in his own home. They wanted a piece of him, but he just wanted to hide in silence. "No," George shouted back. "It's not a weekend. I have to get to work. Now both of you just please be quiet so I can ask your mother something." Honey, I have a flat tire and I have this really important meeting I have to get to today and I need your car, he said frantically. What about the spare? She asked. Of course you would bring that up. I never got it fixed. Well, I can't help you, George. I have to take the kids to school and then I have a dentist appointment. Then I have to get the puppy to the vet. Then I have a parent-teacher meeting. Should I continue? You're not the only one who has things to do. You act like you're the only important one in this family, but I run this house and this family, and if I don't have a car today, I can't do my job. She had become good at mounting a good offense to preempt George's attacks. Yes, but if I'm late to this meeting, then I may not have a job, he said. As George and his wife continued bantering back and forth, the 5-month-old puppy decided to say hello to George as well by jumping and slobbering all over him until he grabbed her by the collar and took her into the kennel. Why'd we get that dog anyway, he asked. Do we really need to deal with a dog right now with all we have going on? That's real nice, his wife said as their daughter started to cry, saying, Daddy doesn't love Sammy. I can't deal with this right now, George said. You can't seem to deal with anything anytime, his wife countered. Can you just drop me off after taking the kids to school, he asked. I'll probably still make it in time for the meeting. I don't have time, George. Didn't you hear all I have to do today? I'll hit serious traffic on the way back and then my day is gone. Why don't you just take the bus, she said. It's only about a mile to the bus stop. The bus? Are you kidding me? The bus? I haven't ridden on a bus since who knows when. Who takes the bus? George asked, very frustrated. Well, today, his wife answered bluntly, you do. That's who. Fine, George said as he grabbed his bag, stomped out of the house, and began the mile-long trek to the bus stop. Bus number 11 stopped in front of George, who was huffing, puffing, and swearing under his breath. What a surprise, George thought. I actually made the bus. With my luck, I figured I would miss it. As George stepped on the bus, he made eye contact with the driver, who had the two brightest eyes and the biggest smile he had ever seen. Good day to you today, sugar, she cheered. George just grumbled and took his seat. What's so good about it, he thought. But her eyes never left him as she watched him walk to his seat through her rearview mirror. George could feel her eyes on him. Why is she looking at me? I paid the fare, he thought. He could see her big, never-ending smile in the rearview mirror and wondered, does this woman ever stop smiling? Doesn't she know it's Monday? Who smiles on Monday? Where are you going? She asked. George pointed to himself. Me? Yeah, you, sugar. I haven't seen you on my bus before, and I know everyone on this route. To work at the NRG company, he asked. Cute. The building downtown with the big light bulb on it, she asked excitedly. Yes, we make light bulbs, answered George, who wished he had time to get a paper so he could bury his head in it. So what do we owe the pleasure of having you on my bus today, she asked. Flat tire, he said. I hate taking the bus, but I have a meeting I have to get to with my team, and I had no other choice. Excuse me. Well, you just sit back, relax, and don't worry about a thing. You may not like taking the bus, but I gotta tell you, this is no ordinary bus. This is my bus, and you're going to enjoy the ride. My name is George. What's yours? George mumbled his name, hoping she would just leave him alone. His words were short, and so was his fuse. Even on his best days, George was not a man who enjoyed chit-chatting, and he certainly didn't feel like talking to a bus driver who seemed like she had drunk one too many cups of coffee, and of all names, hers had to be Joy. Figures, he thought. Joy was something that had certainly been lacking in his life. He couldn't remember the last time he was happy. I bet she has no worries, he thought. All she has to do is drive a bus each day and smile and be nice to strangers. Sure, she can be all cheery and smile at me, but she knows nothing about me. She doesn't know the stress I deal with each day. She doesn't know the responsibilities I face at work and at home. Wife, boss, kids, employees, deadlines, mortgage, car payment, and a mom who's sick with cancer. She doesn't know how drained I feel. But she did know. Every day they walked on and off her bus and she could spot them immediately. They came in all shapes, ages, colors, and sizes. Men, women, white, black, Asian, white collar, and blue collar. Yet all had a similar energy about them. She could see and feel it immediately, lifeless, no kick in their step, like a light had been turned off inside them. She could tell the people who shone brightly and those who had a subtle dim. She called them dimmers. They walked around like zombies just trying to get through the day. No purpose, no spirit, no energy, as if it had been sucked out of them by the daily grind of life. She could tell the men who had given up their dreams. She knew the women who were working by day and taking care of a family by night. And she heard the complaints all the time. Too many people were overstressed, overtired, and overworked. That's why she made it her mission to be an energy ambassador and to try and energize everyone who came on her bus. That's why she called her ride the energy bus. And if anyone could use an energy boost, it was George. You know, you came on my bus for a reason, George, she said firmly to him. Everyone does. George snapped back. No, I came on your bus because I had a flat tire. You can choose to look at it that way, George, or you can see the big picture here. Everything happens for a reason. Don't forget that. Every person we meet, every event in our life, every flat tire happens for a reason. You can choose to ignore it or ask what the reason is and try to learn from it. Every problem has a gift for you in its hands, as my man Richard Bach says. You can choose to see the curse or the gift, and this one choice will determine if your life is a success story or one big soap opera. And while I love soap operas, George, I don't like seeing real life people like you living them. And George, I got to tell you that from the look of you, you're not making the right choice. So choose wisely, George. Choose wisely. At that, the bus stopped and George got off as fast as he could, feeling more like he'd been hit by a bus than riding on one. Choose wisely. Soap opera stuck in his head. Whatever, he thought, and shrugged it off. His team was waiting for him and he hated being late. Joy didn't always like hitting her passengers straight between the eyes with the truth, but with stubborn ones like George, she knew there was no other way. It was the stubborn ones who often had the most potential. She knew because many years ago she had been just like him. Down, out, tired, and negative. People had offered to help her, but she had never accepted it. She had been angry at the world and hadn't thought she deserved it. It was ironic how the people who needed help the most were the ones most closed off from receiving it. She had had a big coat of armor just like George did now, so sometimes the blunt truth was the only way through it. Joy figured she would never see George again, but hoped that at least her piercing words would do some good. Are we stopping or going?
The only thing I really kind of highlighted in that was everything happens for a reason. Don't forget that. Every person we meet, every event in our life, every flat tire happens for a reason. You can choose to ignore it, or ask what the reason is and try to learn from it. Every problem has a gift for you. And the big thing is to choose wisely. And I think that's so true. And we see that, okay, especially at Rally was a good place because we had so many group, like such a big group of people from all different walks and all different situations going on in their life currently. And you see people that have, just have drama. They have a lot of drama in their life. And they're reacting to it in a dramatic way. There is a way to have drama in your life and not be dramatic about it, but it's all about those choices. When we were going through all of our tough times, I can think of 2 times that I had a dramatic outburst. And that's truly what it was. It was truly like a full-on meltdown. And then it was just a moment and then it passed and I was like, okay, I'm regrouping. I can do this. And so, but it's important to just kind of realize that. So if you do have drama going on in your life, because, good people have drama. I mean, that's just life. It comes and goes and ebbs and flows and all of that, and the drama comes and goes. It's just a matter of how we respond to it. And so if you are going through a dramatic time in your life, just know you do have a choice in how you respond to that. You may not have a choice in the drama. It may be coming and it's out of your hands. There's not really anything you can do about it, but you do have a choice in how you respond to it. And if you just kind of like, okay, well, let's shift. Let's sidestep this as best we can and let that kind of burn itself out and then keep going. And another dramatic thing comes, okay, let's shift the other direction. Let's sidestep this and just let that kind of burn out. So it's very important to just kind of to recognize that and accept it, and be like, it's okay. It's okay if you have drama in your life right now or from time to time. That's totally okay. That's normal. It is. A lot of people hide it pretty well, but it's normal to go through dramatic times. So, that was the big thing that I kind of took from this first chapter. And the first couple chapters are just kind of setting the stage and helping us get to know George, just like we got to know Michael in the last book, right? Do you have something you want to share, Lydia?
Gina said she loves the reminder to see it as either a curse or a gift. I think that's very true.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it is. And a lot of times, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have actually said to a recruit or a potential recruit, and I'm like, hey, our paths cross for a reason. I don't know what it is, but I'm here. And this is my gift. This is what I bring to the table. So do you know why our paths cross? I've said that outwardly to people because it's just, I truly believe that. When you go to a party and 2 people show up, well, those 2 people are there for a reason. You know, whether you go to a party and 20 people show up or 2 people show up. And sometimes 20 people show up, but only 2 are actually engaged. Those 2 are there for a reason, right? And so I think that all the time. And that's kind of what fuels my fire when it gets the little bit doused when you walk in and there's only 2 people there and you're like, okay, I drove an hour and a half. Let's party.
We're going to have enough food to feed everybody.
Yay. Yay. Exactly. All right. Yeah, I love that the company is called Energy. Yeah.
You had to make me laugh. I had to stop a minute. I was like,
I know. Clearly you didn't read the book. No. But actually when you read it, you don't really read it like that. So you saying it out loud actually reminded me because I read it yesterday and I was like, oh, the Energy company. But I didn't put it back together. So, because like I said, it's been a long time since I actually read this book. So, all right. So we're going on chapter 2.
okay. Good news, bad news. That evening, George sat in the car repair shop waiting for his tire to be replaced. It was taking much longer than it should, and as usual, George was growing anxious and impatient. He didn't like waiting in lines for the movies, waiting in traffic, or waiting in line at the grocery store. He always picked the wrong line, and of course, the person in front of him always had a product without a price tag, so a manager needed to be called and the product had to be found, and well, you know. George felt as if the world conspired to inconvenience him. How long could it take to replace a tire, he wondered. At last the mechanic walked briskly into the room. Sir, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is your car isn't destroyed and you're still here. What are you talking about? George shouted. It's a flat tire. Well, that's more good news, sir. The flat tire prevented you from driving the car. While replacing the tire, I remembered seeing a notice from the manufacturer about your make and model, so I had a hunch to do a check on the brakes, and sure enough, they were completely worn down. At any moment, they could have gone, and you would have had no way of stopping. If you had hit a wall or something, you'd be as flat as your tire. You're lucky to be here. Sir, it's been a common problem with your year, make, and model, and you should have received notification of the recall. George remembered seeing some letter from his car manufacturer, but he had just thought it was another sale mail trying to take his money, so he'd thrown it away. The bad news, the mechanic continued, is that the part takes about 2 weeks to get here from the manufacturer. So we'll need to keep the car here, and once the part comes in, we'll be able to have it ready that day. Just great, George thought, not even realizing the good news he had just heard. The only things he was thinking were having his car in the shop for 2 weeks and getting home. Just one more inconvenience in his inconvenient life. Carry on. Okay. Instead of calling his wife to come get him, George decided to walk home the 2 or so miles from the repair shop. He walked more today than he had in several years, but at this point, he didn't feel like talking to anyone, especially his wife. Car in the repair shop for 2 weeks, he thought. What else could go wrong? He was near his breaking point. Just last night, his wife had told him she was unhappy in their marriage and that George's negativity was making the entire family miserable. She'd given him an ultimatum. Change it or it was over. It wasn't the first of their marital problems, and certainly it wasn't the first time she had told George he was negative. But now it was real, and he didn't want to lose the woman he loved. He knew she loved him too, but as she had said, no matter how much she loved him, she wouldn't live with someone who made her life so miserable. He vowed to change, but for the first time in his life, he was at a loss. He felt like his life was spinning out of control, and he couldn't do anything to stop it. He had always been able to fix every problem and rise to every occasion, meet any challenge, especially in his marriage, yet now he felt truly powerless, as if his life was being lived by someone else while he watched it unravel. That night he had yelled to the heavens asking for help and had woken up with a flat tire. Some help, he thought, just one more problem I don't need right now. George walked briskly, hoping to get home in time to read the kids a book. It was one of the few things he enjoyed doing, and it was something they loved as well. Whenever he was working in his home office, they would always come in and say it was time for him to read a book, which he always did. His 2 kids were his driving force. He loved his family, and he wanted to be able to provide for them and give them everything he had never had. They had a beautiful home. The school district was one of the best in the state, and the children thrived. He and his wife drove new cars and did their best to keep up with the Joneses, the Smiths, and whoever else they were supposed to be keeping up with. Yet with his family also came great pressure and responsibility. Work hadn't been going so well, and his last review was very troubling. His team was in disarray. Their productivity was in the toilet, and George had been told that if he didn't get it together, he would be replaced. For the first time in his life, his job was in serious jeopardy. So as George walked, he thought of his family, his wife's ultimatum, and his job. He was in danger of losing it all, and the car problem was the final straw. Something good had to be coming my way, he thought. It can't continue like this, or else I'm done. My life wasn't always like this, he shouted to the stars. I was a young go-getter once. Everyone talked about my great potential. I was a rising star in my company. My future was bright. I squeezed the juice out of life. Now I can't even get my hands on a piece of fruit. I can't take this anymore, he yelled. Please help me, he shouted as he looked up to the moonlit sky. The air was silent, and George heard nothing except the sound of his own breath. He was waiting for something, a word, a sound, a bolt of lightning. He wasn't sure what, but something. Keep going. You're muted. Should I keep
Yeah,
going?
I just realized. I'm like, just looking at me. Yeah, keep going for the next two, chapter 4 and 5.
So stop at 6? Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll probably go more.
George woke up the next morning feeling tired, anxious, and stressed as usual. Every day he wondered what else was going to go wrong, but at least today he knew he wouldn't have car problems. Do you want me to drive you today? His wife asked. I do have time. No, it's okay, he answered. I'll take the bus. It's not that bad, except for the driver. What's wrong with the driver? She asked. Long story, I'll tell you later, he said as he put on his sneakers for his trek to the bus stop. Then his mood turned even more sour as he thought about seeing the bus driver who had insulted him. Choose wisely. Soap opera stuck in his head. Who does she think she was talking to? He shook his head and then turned his attention toward the sneakers because it became painfully obvious that he wasn't able to untie his shoes. The laces were tied in 20 different knots, and he knew full well that his kids had been playing in the closet again. He threw his shoes against the wall, breathed a big huff, and just sat in painful silence. More silence. A minute later, he looked in the mirror above his dresser and saw himself as he heard a voice from his own conscience saying, You, the bus driver was talking to you. You're the one with the failing marriage. You're the one who's about to get fired, who now doesn't even have a car to drive to work and can't even put on your own shoes. You're the one living the soap opera. The realization hit him unexpectedly. He couldn't disagree with Joy. She was right. His life and career had hit rock bottom. Even his boss and biggest supporter and mentor had sat in his office yesterday and told him he couldn't vouch for him anymore. I can't carry you anymore, his boss said. I don't want to be carried, George replied. But that's what I've been doing. Everyone's asking me what happened to George, and I'm saying I don't know, but he'll get it together. Well, now they're looking at me saying he better get it together or else you'll both be gone. I love you, George, like a son, but I can't let you bring me down too. I've worked too hard for this. I have kids in college. I'll get it together, George declared. We'll see, said his boss. As my old football coach used to say, we don't talk this game, we play it. So I hope to see action soon, because if you don't get it together, then we both know what has to happen. Fired was a word George never thought he would hear, and now he was hearing it all too frequently in the same sentence with his name. I need to try and turn this around today, he thought. How? I have no idea. George finally got his shoes on, and as he walked to the bus stop, Joy, the bus driver, and her smile popped into his head. Maybe she's not all that bad. After all, she pegged you, George, he thought to himself. But do I really need another person telling me how much my life stinks? I mean, not only do I have to hear it from my boss and my wife, now I even have a bus driver and total stranger on me. Who would be next to tell me what a loser I am? The mailman? He made it to the bus stop in plenty of time and waited for bus 11 to pull up, expecting to see Joy at the wheel. But when the bus arrived, Joy was nowhere to be found. Instead, a man was at the wheel, and he certainly didn't have the smile nor the welcome she had. George wondered what had happened to her. He felt bad for being rude to her. After all, she was only trying to be nice, and it wasn't her fault my life is in the toilet. George sat quietly on the bus. No conversation, no smiling, and certainly no energy. He thought about yesterday's meeting with his boss and the meeting he had with his team. He knew some changes had to happen, and they had to happen quickly. He was ready to do something. What, he wasn't sure, but he knew he needed to do something to save his job, his family, and his marriage. He would start today, he thought.
All right. So I think we can, am I muted? No. Okay. Just all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, am I muted? Am I talking to myself? Let's go ahead through chapter 6.
Okay.
And see where we're at. Because I would like to get through chapter 7, because that's when we at least get into the first rule that we can talk about. But we'll see how close we are to 10:30.
Okay. George, am I going? Okay. You guys started listening to me yet? Because here we go. George arrived even earlier the next day at the bus stop. He sat on the bench and thought about work yesterday and how he had wanted to make an impact and get things moving in the right direction. But as usual, one crisis had led to another, and he and his team had spent most of the day dealing with conflict and putting out fires rather than getting something done. George thought about each member of his team and how each one contributed to his growing problems. I should fire every one of them. The thought made him smile, but then reality set in, and he knew there was no way he could do that. If anything, he was the one who would be leaving the company before any of them. Besides, they weren't bad people. He had even hired a few of them. They had just lost their way somehow, he thought. Like a bad marriage, he figured, where you can't finger any one thing as the cause, yet you know it just isn't right. George was in such deep thought that he didn't hear bus 11 pull up. When he looked up and he saw Joy once again at the wheel, and her smile made him smile. Well, look at here. Look who we have here today. How you doing, sugar? I didn't think I would see you again. Me neither, answered George. I was on the bus yesterday too, but you weren't here. Where were you? He asked. Tuesday's my day off, sugar. It's the day I take care of my sick father. He can't remember anything anymore. Doesn't remember his name or his pride and joy. Could you imagine not being able to remember me? Not easy to see your father every week and he has no idea who you are. I'm sorry, said George, feeling bad that he hadn't thought she had a care in the world. Everything is not always as it seems. Don't be sorry, sugar. It's part of life. Every one of us got challenges. Everyone who comes on the bus has problems. Some got marriage problems, health problems, family problems, work problems. Some got all kinds of problems. It's part of life, and I'm just another person on the bus who's got another problem. But you're so happy and cheery, said George. How do you stay so happy? It's just what I'm all about, sugar. It's because I love life. It's because I love you. And it's because I love me. How can I love myself if I don't love you? How could I love myself if I don't love everyone? You see, we're all connected and I love it all, even the ones who are hard to love. Like me, George thought. Yes, like you, George, she said, reading his mind. And how about you, she asked. What are you doing on my bus again? I thought we had seen the last of you after you ran off the bus faster than Carl Lewis at the 1984 Olympics. I consider myself blessed not once but twice with your presence, so please do tell. George told her about the flat tire, the repair shop, the brakes, and how he could have crashed if he had driven the car, and how he would have to take the bus for about 2 weeks. Well, that's just great, George. The fact that you're going to be riding on my bus is a great thing. As I said the other day, you're on my bus for a reason. I didn't know why exactly then, but I do know now. George asked why curiously, not quite catching on. What's so great about having your car in the shop for 2 weeks, he asked. Man, your head is hard to crack, but I'm going to be gentle with you. Look up there, George, to the right of the mirror. Tell me what you see. A sign, said George. That's right, a sign. And what does the sign say? It says the 10 rules for the ride of your life. Underneath this headline was a list of 10 rules that George really couldn't make out. He didn't have his reading glasses on and the words were blurry. Besides, the sign's letters were handwritten and not very legible. That's right, sugar. All my long-term passengers learn those 10 rules. We talk about them often, and now I get to share them with you. I'm so excited, she cheered. Look at the big picture here, George. This ain't no coincidence. We got about 10 days on my bus together, and I've got 10 rules for the ride of your life. George squirmed a little in his seat. I have enough rules in my life, he said. Wife rules, home rules, little league rules. The last thing I want is more rules. Joy turned very serious for a moment. Her smile turned into a dead stare as she looked George right in the eye. You need these rules, George, she declared firmly. Never turn your back on something that will change your life forever. You got 10 days. I got 10 rules that will change your life. Great things are coming your way if you're open, George. Be open. Please be open. And at that, she smiled brightly once again and asked, Are you with me? In a calm, firm voice that made it clear she wasn't taking no for an answer. Yes, George answered, not believing he was actually agreeing to this. And all at once, the entire bus cheered. Yes, yes, yes. George looked around and for the first time realized there were a group of other passengers on the bus as well. Don't be scared, Joy said. We always chant yes when a new long-term passenger agrees to learn the 10 rules. It's our thing. It's what makes this energy bus. We're all about positive energy here, and it's what makes the ride so great. You don't get more positive than the word yes. So you're ready to learn rule number 1? We've got 5 minutes before we get to your stop, and this is a quick one. George nodded, still a little in shock. Everything was moving really fast, and a bunch of mixed feelings were swirling around inside him. On one hand, he wanted to jump out the window, while on the other hand, he was really curious to learn the 10 rules. After all, what did he have to lose? At this point, nothing, he thought.
All right, let's keep going. We're going to finish at the end of chapter 7. That way we can have a little discussion right there at the end of chapter 7, because now we're actually getting into the meat and potatoes of the book. Now that we know all about George and what's going on in his life. That's the only downside, I think, to John Gordon's books, is that the first like several chapters are all like, it's just a story, you know? And so
I was always like,
I know. I know. Isn't she such a good reader? Gina says you're such a good reader, Jenny. You are a good reader. Like, you're just like the inflection in your voice. And yeah, you do everything short of like giving George a masculine voice.
I can go there.
Now, if you start giving the characters voices, I just don't, you're the official reader. I think my internet just went down. All right, so yeah, let's go on to chapter 7, and then we'll just discuss that a little bit before we get off.
Okay. Rule number 1 is easy, Joy declared as she turned to a man sitting opposite George. He looked like a combination of a well-dressed accountant and a mad scientist who could easily pass for Einstein's offspring. Danny, please show George rule number 1, she asked. Danny reached into his large file folder sitting on his lap and pulled out a piece of paper that said, Rule number 1, you're the driver of your bus. Joy thanked Danny and shared how Danny had been made a keeper of the rules. A year ago, he was what I call a corporate zombie, Joy explained, walking around with no purpose and no life. You could have hit him over the head with a sledgehammer, and I don't think he would have noticed, she laughed. Now he's keeper of the rules and helping us move the bus forward, she said proudly. Taking a big swig from a large bottle of water that sat next to her seat, she turned her attention to George. Always remember that you are the driver of your bus. It's the most important of the rules, because if you don't take responsibility for your life and control of your bus, then you can't take it where you want it to go. If you're not the driver, then you'll always be at the whim of everyone else's travel plans. But what about the support of others? George asked. Of course you can seek directions and advice along the way, but remember, it's your bus and your trip. We're all driving on each other's bus, but each one of us has our own bus. The problem today, Joy continued, is that people feel like they have no say where their bus is going or how it's going to get there. Tell them that stat about when the most people die, Marty. Oh, tell them that stat about when the most people die, Marty, she directed as she looked in the rearview mirror at the young 20-something man sitting toward the back of the bus. He was dressed in a polo and khakis and had a young face with blonde hair that sat on his head like a mop. As Marty pulled out his laptop and started keyboarding and clicking, looking for the stat, Joy told George how Marty had come to be their research guy, how they could always get into interesting conversations about life, business, success, or whatever, and like clockwork, Marty would always come up in the next day with some important research that shed some light on what they had discussed. They called him the Google man because he could find the best information on any topic. Here it is, he shouted as he lifted up his laptop for everyone to see the screen. The screen said, more people die Monday morning at 9 a.m. than any other time. Well, we all made it this week. Isn't that amazing? Joy asked George, who did not quite understand the significance of this research and just stood silent. Hello, George. I'm going to wake you up today like a shot of espresso, she chuckled. Monday at 9 a.m. is when people start their work week, Joy said passionately. Think about that, George. People would rather die than go to work, she said as the passengers on the bus chuckled. It sounds funny, but it's actually quite sad. People feel like they don't have a choice, so they give up. But I am here to tell you today that you do have a choice. Right, folks? She said, rallying the passengers on the bus. You don't have to sit passively by like so many other unhappy souls who let life create them. You can take the wheel and choose to create your life, one thought, one belief, one action, one choice at a time. It's your bus and you're the driver, and you choose where you're going and the kind of ride it's going to be. Don't you agree, Sugar? She asked. I don't know, George answered. To me, it feels like over time, everyone in your life, including life itself, makes more and more decisions for you. And before you know it, it's not even your life anymore. The government tells me what taxes I have to pay. My bosses tell me what to do at work. My wife orders me around at home. I feel imprisoned by my paycheck and responsibilities. So to answer your question, no, I really don't feel like I have a choice. The real truth is that instead of living, I feel like I'm dying every day. Maybe I'll be one of those 9 a.m. Monday morning people, George said. There's no maybe about it, Joy countered. If you continue down this poor me road, you're well on your way to being a Monday 9 a.m. fatality. So what you got to do now, George, is take the wheel and change direction. You may not have felt like you had a choice in the past, but starting now, you will realize it's your greatest gift. And once you reclaim your power, everything, and I mean everything, will begin to change. No one can choose your attitude but you. No one else can choose your energy, George. In fact, smile for me right now, sugar. George didn't budge. I'm not asking you, George. Now smile. So he did, knowing she was the one woman he didn't want to see get mad. See, George, you chose to smile, and just by doing that one thing, you changed your energy. A smile changes the way you feel, the way you think, and how you interact with others. The energy you fuel the ride of your life with is entirely up to you. And as the driver, you're the one who must choose your vision of where you want to go. You have the best seat and the best view of your life, so it's up to you. You got to have vision. So let me ask you, do you know where you want to go, George? George sat straight up, looked out the window, and noticed they were about a mile from his office building. He didn't have a clue where he wanted to go. He just knew he didn't want to be where he was anymore. Joy had known it before George even thought it. A man with a vision has a certain look in his eye and walk in his step. He walks like he knows where he's going and why he's going there, and George didn't walk like that. I know we're almost at your office, Joy said, but I want you to read something before you get off. It's something that inspired me to call this the energy bus. She reached into her bag next to her seat and pulled out a children's book with a graphical picture of a bus on the cover with the words energy bus on it. It's a children's book, George said, very frustrated, as he wondered why in the world she would want him to read a children's book right now. I know, that's what I love about it. You see, life is simple, but in all our stuff, we make it complicated and become blinded to the simple truths. But it's the simplest lessons in life that often are the most profound and meaningful. So don't scoff at children's books or the simple rules I share with you, because one of the most important things you could ever realize is that the closer you get to the truth, the simpler and more powerful the lessons become. Yes, the rules are simple, but as you will realize, they mean everything. So read, George, read. Feeling a little embarrassed, George started to read. Nonetheless, and at once, he was transported in his own mind to his house, reading his children the book. This is your energy bus. You're the driver. Did you know you can take your bus anywhere you want to go? Say yes 3 times with me. Yes, yes, yes. You can take it to the movies, the beach, or the North Pole. Just say where you want to go and believe that it will be so. Because every journey and ride begins with the desire to go somewhere and do something. And if you have a desire, then you also have the power to make it happen. The bus stopped and Joy turned to George. So where do you desire to go, George? What's your vision? She asked as she handed him a piece of paper. Once you know this, all the other rules will fall into place. George sat at his desk looking at the piece of paper Joy had given him. At the top of the page were instructions from Joy. First decide what you want, George. Then you can start creating it. Don't let the world create you. You create your world. Complete these questions and we'll talk about them on the bus tomorrow. It had 3 sections on it with a space for him to write, and it looked like this. My vision for my life, including my health, is. 2, my vision for my work, career, job, and team is. And 3, my vision for my relationship and family is.
Okay, so I thought your joke was funny, by the way, that we're all here. We made it past 9 a.m. on a Monday. Yay. All right. So a couple things that I highlighted was where she says, always remember that you're the driver of your bus. It's the most important of the rules because you take responsibility for your life and control of your bus. Then you can't take it where you want to go. If you're not the driver, you'll always be at the whim of everybody else's travel plans. And thinking about that, again, that kind of goes back to what I was talking about in the beginning, as far as, like that drama. So drama is other people's travel plans, right? Drama is the dramatic things are wanting to take you in this direction when your goal is to go in this direction. So that's where you have that choice to kind of go against the grain, let the drama happen over there, recognize it, say, oh, okay, I see you, I understand you, but I'm going this way, mentally, not, literally. But yeah. And then the other thing, and this was the one highlight that I had in this entire book. Like when I opened it and I said, oh, I didn't highlight anything. I found one highlight and it was on page 28. And it says, you don't have to sit passively like so many other unhappy souls who let life create them. You take the wheel and choose to create your life. One thought, one belief, one action, one choice at a time. It's your bus and you're the driver and you choose where you're going and the kind of ride it's going to be. And I think that statement right there, it's just right there at the top of page 28, is so powerful because we are in charge of our life and where it's going, and where it's not happening to us. It does to a certain extent, but we still always have that choice of how we react to it and what direction we take from that point forward. And that's so unbelievably powerful. Just that statement right there. I mean, just honestly, that's like a mantra that people could repeat to themselves every morning and be like, I'm in charge. I'm the driver of my bus. I'm doing this. And it says, you may not have felt like you had a choice in the past, but starting now, you will realize it's your greatest gift. And once you reclaim your power, everything, and I mean everything, will begin to change. No one can choose your attitude but you. No one else can choose your energy. And that too is just a very powerful statement, and just kind of recognizing your power in this situation and not giving it away. I mean, when you morph into somebody else's power, or somebody else's energy, say somebody's got a negative energy and you just climb in that ditch with them and you're just down there and you're all negative and nasty too, you're giving away your power in that moment by going in the direction that they're going versus where your vision wants to take you. And then just when she says, you choose to smile, and just by doing that one thing, you've changed your energy. I think we've all been in a situation at some point where just simply smiling lightened our mood, right? Just simply laughing lightened our mood. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was just not in a good mood. I can't remember if I was sad or if I was just frustrated or what it was, but I wasn't in a good mood. And I had so much stuff to do, and I was trying to get James in bed, and so I could get more stuff done. And he comes in and he's like, Mom, let's watch AFV, right? America's Funniest Home Videos, which gets a little old after a while, right? But it's new to him and he thinks it's the funniest thing ever. And I said, you know what, James, let's do it, because I knew he was going to laugh his head off and that was going to change my mood. And it sure did, because it's the montage at the end when they put music to it and they put all these clips of people tripping and all this other stuff, he laughs his little head off, and you can't help but smile and just laugh, even if you're not laughing at what's on the screen. It's just the energy is so good. And I thought, you know what, he's going to do this for me. He's going to help pull me out of whatever this funk is I'm in, you know? And so even if you can just laugh yourself, watch a movie that makes you laugh or whatever, you know, or call somebody that makes you laugh. I can't tell how many times I've called somebody because I wasn't in the best of mood. And by the end, I was laughing and I was lighter and I felt better all around about life. Like, I could deal with this.
So if you save one of those videos to your save stuff, babies laughing.
Oh
yeah. Yeah. I have one saved, and when when it's over, I'll just pull up the video, and once about 3 babies in, I'm just like, okay. They don't have a clue, but they sure are cute.
It's so true. That's really smart to find a video like that. What about the little girl with the curly hair and she's like, I love my hair, I love my life, I love my sister, I love my mom, I love my dad. Like, you know, I mean, like one of those videos that just set your heart on fire, you know, and it's just like, that's really smart.
The little girl with the Mother's Day video, did you ever see that? That she's like, she's very Southern, and she's out on the front porch, and her mom wants her to call her grandma to wish her a happy Mother's Day. And she's like, but she's not my mama. She's your mama. You should call her. You need to represent your mama. Oh my God. I laugh at that thing she goes, you need to represent.
Oh my God, that's hysterical.
It is. She's so funny. And she goes, I wished you a happy Mother's Day. You need to call your mama and wish her a happy.
I remember, so there was it was when all these videos were going around, and they were the ones where people do the cuts of people on the news, right? And they mesh it, right? So the one that's like, hide your kids, hide your wives, like all that one. And then the other one where the house is on fire. And we were on our way to Columbus, and it's me and Loretta and Pam and Jim in the car. And we were like, watch this one, watch it. We just kept pulling up videos. We're like, have you seen this one? And then we're just laughing. Like, nobody got time for that. And we were laughing our heads off, you know? I mean, it was just so funny. Oh, that's a perfect example, Jenny. I got to share this example. We were riding in the car on the way back from Columbus, and this song came on, and I don't care where I am. I was in an Applebee's one time, and this song came on, and tears are just running down my face. So the beauty of this song, right? So we're in the car. The song comes on. It's the one that's like, I'll love you for 1,000 years and 1,000 more. Oh my God, that song, it's a beautiful song, but I cannot get through it without crying. Because we were at Applebee's and Eric looked at me and goes, oh my God, are you crying? I'm like, yes, I can't help it. This song's just so beautiful. He's like, oh Lord. So the song was on in the car, and we're all kind of like having this melancholy moment, and Jenny's kind of looking out the window, and Pam and Jim are holding hands, and I'm like looking out the window, and I'm just like, oh my God. And the energy in the car was just so pathetic, right? And then Jim, I don't know who said it, but somebody's just like, we gotta change this up. Like,
what is up with this song?
Like, we gotta stop this right now. And what song did we put on?
Barry White.
Barry White, that's right. And Gina was in the car with Loretta, and we pulled up to Lodi, and Jim starts driving around their car, and he's blaring Barry White, and we are singing at the top of our lungs. Do you remember that, Gina? And Gina and Loretta looked at us like we were crazy. Like, yeah, you guys are crazy. That's why that happened, because we had to change the energy in the car because it took a nosedive. So you talk about doing whatever it takes to change the energy. That was that moment, Gina. That's what was going on right there. It was the funniest thing. But I mean, doing something simple and silly like that is so powerful in changing your energy in that moment, whatever it is. Great backstory. Yeah, it just occurred to me that you were a part of that, and you probably didn't even know what had happened in the car. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the same night that you got out of the car and I was in the car and they kept playing Barry White, and I texted you and I was like, I can't believe you left me in this car.
I know, you're like, why? You left me. I can't believe you left me. Like, this is weird. It's getting really weird.
I'm going to get my car and go away when I get Bells.
Oh my gosh. So funny.
Yeah. Oh.
But yeah, so the last part here, I challenge all of us to go review these questions, you know, and to think about, and I do that a couple times a year. I know you don't want to do it. I do that a couple times. I'm not asking for your why. I didn't say the W word. So I do this a couple times a year. I think of like, what is my perfect day? What is my perfect life? What is my ideal family situation? What is my ideal household? Like, what does it look like, feel like? What's the energy? Like, I do that several times a year, and it helps me so much with recognizing like where I am. Am I closer to where I wanted to be from the last time I did this, or am I further away? And it's so important. And so like right now, like one of the things that I am like full on concentrating on is my personal health. And I've been doing that for several months. After about a month of quarantine, when things were just like, I was like, hey, I don't have to be anywhere. I don't have to impress anybody. I can eat whatever I want. I can drink whatever I want. And I was like, okay, this needs to stop. Like, this is not who I am regularly, so I need to stop behaving like I have a hall pass, you know. And I'm like, so I, you know, and I took that on because I knew that my own health and immunity was more important than anything else. And so that's what I've been focused on all this time, is managing my stress, doing, you know, practicing self-care, you know, eating better for myself. And so, because unfortunately with my health, I have a very small margin of error. And so when I step into that gray zone, I get sick pretty fast. So I have to be careful with that. So that is something that is like, for the vision for my life, including my health, that is very prominent for me right now, you know? And so it's important to just kind of, this is our measuring stick, right? This is kind of how we're just seeing where we're at, just taking our own temperature to see Like, where are we at right now? How are we doing with this? Are we sliding? Are we doing well? Because it's normal. It's normal. And so you may look at all three of these and you're like, I am so far off the point for all of these things. Like, I'm so far off my mark. I need to do some adjusting. And some of you might look at them and be like, I got this. Like, I'm doing this. I've already done this. I've mastered this, and that's amazing. But even if you're looking at this and you're like, this isn't at all where I want to be, that's okay. This is a starting point. So I think we all could benefit from, just kind of looking at these questions and reflecting on this next week. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to share? I need to mark my page. If I don't mark my page, then we're all texting each other. Where are we at? Where are we at?
Laughing and the smiling and stuff like that. That is honestly how I get through most of my life. It is. If I can't find something funny about something, I'm like, it's not even worth being here if it's not at least a little amusing. So
I know. And I have to be honest, Pam has been a phenomenal model of that for me since my first month in the business. My first month in the business, I know I've told the story about the first month in the business, and I've been working so hard. I was doing all this stuff, and we went down to Columbus for Fall Fest, and we were on our way back, and I was missing my family because I've been working so much. And I called my in-laws, and my father-in-law thought he was being funny, and he wasn't. And he told me I couldn't see my kids because they'd been at their house so long that, they've been here so long, you don't need to see them. I mean, we're taking care of them. And I burst into tears. My mother-in-law heard him. And so she's like, you can't say that. So she gets up and she's like, you can't say that. And I heard her, give me the phone. She's like, you can't say that to a mother. She gets on the phone. She's like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a man. He's not a mother. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Don't you come over here. You tuck them in. You do this. You do that. She's like, do whatever you want. You can stay the night. You can do it. And I'm just like, okay. And I remember I hung up the phone and I was so upset. And Pam's like, Ellen, you got to lighten up. She's like, you've been working a lot and this is just a moment for you, but you've got to lighten up. And I hear those words in my head all the time. It was one moment right there when she just looked at me in the rear, because she was driving. And I was in the back seat. She looked at me in the rear mirror. She's like, you got to lighten up. And I was just like, okay, I do. I'm like way too stressed. I'm taking life way too seriously right now. I need to lighten up. And so whenever I get in those moments, I hear her voice and she's like, Ellen, you got to lighten up. Like, I mean, she wasn't, she's like, I get it. I understand how you feel, but you can't keep like going at this pace and being this intense. And I'm just like, okay. And so I hear it all the time. And that's where, Jenny, you talking about laughter gets you through a lot of those moments. That's when I hear her say, Ellen, you got to lighten up. Like, this is not life or death. Like, you need to, it's okay. And then usually I turn to laughter to try and pull me through it. So, because we all have those moments.
sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Lydia, oh yeah.
So we're kind of out of time, so forget that. But
What are you gonna say?
Well, one of the most awkward times that I ever had, that I just had to find something amusing about things, was the first time I came back to Raleigh after Michael had passed away, because I did not want to come.
Right.
Ellen, you was like, you need to be there. You need to be there. You need to be there. And I was like, I don't want to come. You need to be there. You need to be around us. You need to come. Well, it just so happened that the day I went back was my birthday. And I got there, and because it's just a sick side of me, guys. I'm sorry. It just happens in my head. And I didn't want to be there, but all of these people, there was like this horrible moment for everybody where they didn't know whether to tell me they were sorry or wish me a happy birthday. And it just got like, I got so amused inside myself that I was okay with being there, because I was like, these poor people don't know what to say.
I don't want to say that I'm sorry or happy birthday.
I'm so sorry.
How's your day? Hope it's a great one.
It's kind of like, yeah, we love it. So, yeah.
You came back to I don't even remember this. You came back to Raleigh on your birthday after Michael died? Wow, that was like within...
It was about a week and a half. It was about 2
Yeah.
weeks. Yeah. But you were, and I think it was just because you talked to me like every day, and you knew I wasn't getting better, and you were like, you need to be around us. You need to come. You need to come. And I went, and everybody was like, Oh, Jenny, it's so good to see you. I'm so sorry for your loss. Happy birthday. This is incredible.
That is so funny. You're like, I made that whole situation so awkward, and I think it's hysterical.
When you're here now, you figure it out.
I'm keeping score. We have 2 happy birthdays. We have 3 sorry for your loss
And 4 people that
that are just avoiding all eye contact.
Bye. Love you.
Oh, I love it. Gina says our curse was your gift. So true, Gina. Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
And now that we all know the things that go through my head, and whenever I get amused, you can think, I wonder who she's making fun of now.
I already think that. Oh, that's funny. I'm glad you shared that story. All right. Well, thanks everybody. It was a great first week for our new book, and we will see you all next week on book club, but I'm sure we'll see you tonight, tomorrow night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, all the other nights. Thursday morning. All right, everybody. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye, guys.
All right. Bye.
Hi, thank you.